The mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, presented the first 15-minute city in the United States. Oxford, as we know, plans to introduce its own 15-minute cities. The 15-minute city concept, a brainchild of the World Economic Forum of Davos, Switzerland, is already becoming a reality in the United States. The place of the experiment on humans was the city of Cleveland, Ohio. The city authorities promised to implement Klaus Schwab's idea in the interest of the population. Cleveland's Mayor Bibb unveils the 15-minute city in the United States, the Great Reset. He introduced the 15-minute city. Eternal quarantine of Oxford's or plans to introduce 15-minute cities already introduced in the United States. Oxfordshire residents will now need a special permit to move from one zone of the city to another. However, even residents who receive a permit will be allowed to move between zones for a maximum of only 100 days a year. The 15-minute city, the new ghettoization of all humanity, under the auspices of the World Economic Forum of Davos, Switzerland, the next gathering of which will take place. Kathy Hopkins' 15-minute Oxford video began to be promoted. The clip talks about a plan being implemented in Oxford where they are going to introduce a 15-minute city in the name of the climate change. And according to the plan, the city is divided into 6 parts, and the movement of its inhabitants is limited to the specific part they belong to. In fact, this is a new ghetto for service people who are going to make for a new, brave new world, inclusive capitalism. In fact, in the minds of Russians, the concept of a 15-minute city is not precisely defined. This is probably the kind of municipality where you can reach schools, kindergartens, clinics, and shops in 15 minutes without the use of vehicles, on foot or on two-wheeled electric devices. It's the first thing that comes to mind. In fact, this is a long-standing evolution of modern Western urban COPs, which the WF has reworked to fit its own ideas. The term first appeared in the 1980s of the last century. Then it was about creating an optimal density of residents in urban areas and amenities for them. But in the last 30 years, the concept of a 15-minute city has undergone significant changes associated with the work of the French-Colombian scientist Carlos Moreno. He made significant revisions to this in 2016, and according to him, such a city should be made up of 5-minute areas, which he calls complete communities. All this was presented by Moreno as a return to the local way of life. In his 2021 paper, the scientist clarified the concept of the 15-minute city. It should guarantee the residents fulfill 6 basic functions within a 15-minute walking or bike ride from their home. That is, to live, work, shop, receive medical care, get education, and have fun. The framework of this model, according to Moreno, consists of 4 mental pillars: density, optimal for urban development; proximity in both space and time; diversity in development and multicultural mixed-use areas; digitalization within the 4th Industrial Revolution; the introduction of smart city technologies, remote work, and communication. All this was presented by Moreno as a return to the local way of life. In his 2021 paper, the scientist clarified the concept of a 15-minute city. It should guarantee that residents fulfill 6 basic functions within a 15-minute walking or bike ride from their home: to live, work, shop, receive medical care, get education, and have fun. The framework of this model, according to Moreno, consists of 4 mental pillars: density, optimal for urban development; proximity, both space and time, as we said before. It seems that it was not without reason, that Pavel Durov met with the family of sheikhs of the United Arab Emirates not long ago. After all, the UAE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are in close proximity. KSA is currently promoting the longest 15-minute project. It's a huge building called The Line. It's a 170-kilometer long, 200-meter wide mirror metropolis that can accommodate 9 million people. The Line will apparently run on 100% renewable energy, and all the facilities residents need to be available within a 5-minute walk. Obviously, this takes the concept of a 15-minute city to a whole new level, and Durov may well take on its digitalization. Israel's Cookie Schweber Isan reported in an All Israel article January 6 that the Oxford project that was promoted by Kathy Hopkins is similar to ghettos dating back to the Roman Empire. I had never been to Rome before my 50th birthday. The view was amazing, but one of them we remember to this day. When I went to the Roman synagogue, we were told that during the 1600s, thousands of Jews were gathered on 7 acres that became essentially a Roman ghetto where they lived for 3 centuries. Unlike the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II, the ghettos of Rome are much less well known, writes the former teacher from Jerusalem. In the video of an English woman, she sees a new ghetto in which residents are confined to a certain part of Oxford, where they are to be issued passes to cross the districts only 100 times a year. If the mobility limit is exceeded, fines will be imposed for entering a foreign zone. To help the organizers of this experiment, the experience of the COVID vaccination passports and comprehensive video surveillance systems with recognition of people not only by face but also by the motor skills of movements, Schweber Isan notes that the 15-minute city is being touted precisely as a new trend in urban planning. How else could it be framed if it's associated with WEF, the same players pushing globalization of everything from digital currency to eating insects to losing cars? The author of the article asks a rhetorical question. In Oxford, these plans provoked serious protests from the population and temporarily won, and the authorities went back on their word beginning in December to explain this true story with concern for citizens. Oxfordshire County Council accepted this justification. The proposal is actually about traffic filters, which would penalize drivers using certain roads during rush hour to help develop a more resilient, reliable, and inclusive system. But even in this phrase, there is a direct connection to Klaus Schwab's WEF. WEF CEO Director of the Center for a New Economy and Society, Sadia Zahidi, explained the inclusion of the 15-minute city on the agenda of the current meeting of Davos. And this is what they said: climate and human development must be at the center of attention of the global leaders, even as they struggle with current crises. Cooperation is the only way forward. In reality, it consists of future services around the world being sentenced to house arrest, which gives them the luxury of a 15-minute radius of action. Who are we to think we know better than the WEF, who think it's time to curtail freedom of movement as well as all other freedoms, writes Cookie Schweber's Isan. She concludes with her article in Parting Words to the People of Earth for 2023. I wish everyone this year to use freedom and personal choice to promote their rights, the very gifts the Almighty has bestowed upon us. Take part, she said. Now, why are people afraid of 15-minute cities? The newly popular idea of having everything you need close at hand is seen by some as a step towards total control. Robert Bridge is an American author and journalist. He's author of Midnight in American Empire: How Corporations and Their Politicians Are Destroying the American Dream. The protesters against 15-minute cities, in a bid to make cities more user and environmentally friendly, city planners have unveiled the 15-minute cities, which hopes to keep residents closer to home to fight climate change. But will this plan open the door to greater restrictions? More than 2,000 protesters took to the streets of Oxford, England, earlier this month to voice their hostility to the controversial 15-minute city concept, which has already been quietly unveiled in several major cities, including Barcelona in Spain, Melbourne, Australia, Paris, France, and in Milan, Italy. Centered on the work of French Colombian urbanist Carlo Moreno, the 15-minute city is designed so that human needs and services such as shopping, work, education, healthcare are accessible within a short bike ride or walk from the front door. Such a city is divided into neighborhoods or zones, and local residents have little or no need to travel outside their immediate surroundings. When necessary, such journeys can be made via public transport or ring roads, keeping the harmful emissions of private cars in the city air to a minimum. At first glance, this proposition seems hard to dispute. After all, most people have at some point found themselves cursing cars, perhaps even chasing them with a clenched fist, as an Australian friend of mine was prone to do when cars would not stop for him at crosswalks, wishing the machines would go away. In fact, this is what happened recently in central Moscow, when the local government converted several major streets around Red Square to pedestrian traffic only. The results were spectacular. Along the wide streets once reserved for fire engines, young people ride electric scooters, children run around without fear of becoming road dead, and visitors enjoy leisurely meals on patios, minus the vehicular noise and pollution. The population. Meanwhile, businesses do not appear to be adversely affected by the change. In fact, they seem to be flourishing like never before. So where exactly is the problem? It seems that much of the skepticism and even paranoia about 15-minute cities stems from recent history, particularly humanity's experience with the COVID pandemic and restrictive methods. Some world leaders have chosen to deal with it. What started as a 15-day lockdown to flatten the curve of this turned into what many believe was a marathon of prison life. These skeptics now see 15-minute cities as a continuation of the dreaded Great Reset part of the troubling you'll have nothing and be happy formula. They see the idea of ditching at-will car travel as akin to eating bugs, which is really being promoted as a way to mitigate climate change. And they ask, can people who promote such ideas be trusted to regulate everyday life in the city? To further complicate matters, the very idea that climate change is a problem that must be fought at all costs is an issue that appears to be as contentious as a great debate over everything else. Now, during Oxford protests, one of the speakers, a 12-year-old girl named Jasmine, provided a fictional scenario. She said, let's say my friend lives in Zone 3 and I live in Zone 1. For example, I went to my friend's house in Zone 3, my parents come normally and pick me up in their car. It only takes 10 minutes. So does that mean they would have to turn around the ring road and go back to the city again? If my mom or dad had to drive around the ring road, it would take 30 minutes, causing a lot more pollution and leaving a much bigger carbon footprint. Furthermore, is it realistic to believe that every material good and service will always be within easy reach of a 15-minute bike ride or a casual walk? After all, what government bureaucrats promise and what they ultimately deliver rarely line up. And let's not forget that business failures happen on a regular basis and often with little warning. Will people in Zone 1, for example, be forced to pay fines if they have to travel to Zone 5 for essentials such as food, medicine, and even water in case of unexpected shortages? Even if an autonomous neighborhood is ultimately able to maintain stable access to all desires and needs of its inhabitants, opponents of the idea have gone so far as to compare it to a gulag. They feel that a 15-minute city would deprive them of the freedom of choice to leave their neighborhoods and venture to other businesses, schools, and health services without having to spend money, time, and nerves for their privilege. The idea that neighborhoods should be walkable is great, commented Dr. Jordan Peterson via Twitter. The idea that stupid, tyrannical bureaucrats can fiatically decide where you are allowed to drive is perhaps the worst perversion of that idea imaginable, and make no mistake, it's part of a well-documented plan, he said. In addition, there are other socioeconomic questions about equal opportunity, privilege, and even race, no one could have predicted the consequences of imposing travel restrictions on more marginalized consumers who are deprived of quality services in their poorer neighborhoods and now have to pay more access for them from a much greater distance. Oxford's 15-minute city plan does not actually include traffic restrictions or fines, but instead focuses on implementing the system by making sure residents have access to everything they need. This includes boosting local retail, improving delivery services, and other equally well-intentioned measures without infringing on personal liabilities. Given this, critics of the 15-minute city have been called conspiracy theorists. However, Oxfordshire Council has a separate plan, a set of traffic-reducing measures which will be put into trial operation next year. Under that plan, residents would not be allowed to drive on certain city streets for most of the day unless they have a 100-day permit. They're encouraged to use the ring road or public transport. Traffic cameras will monitor compliance and fines will be issued for violations. The aforementioned conspiracy theorists in Oxford have been accused of conflating the two plans to make the 15-minute city idea seem more ominous than it is. However, their concerns are justified by the power creep they've seen during and after COVID-related lockdowns, where we now know digital surveillance measures have been used for more than just reducing the speed of the virus. Back in 1986, former U.S. President Ronald Reagan famously told a group of reporters, "The 9 scariest words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help you.'" Those protesting the idea of 15-minute cities believe they need to get a foot in the door before the creep of power really begins to encroach on personal liberties, which they now believe is the inevitable result. And this is from Hellenic Revenge, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.